This is Anish Chauhan and this is Equilibrium Security. It's time to tackle your biggest cyber security challenges head on. Welcome everybody to episode 15 of our Cyber Hot Seat, where we discuss your most burning issues and tackle your biggest challenges head on. In this episode, I'm really pleased to be joined by Becky Hall, who's our cybersecurity expert, who's worked in a whole host of different vendors. Hi, Becky.
Hi, good morning.
How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on the call.
No problem at all. It's our pleasure. So we're going to be discussing your garden to grid approach. Now, I love the term, by the way. I absolutely, the first time we spoke about this, it was really interesting to hear your approach. But it's your approach to kind of a cyber security strategy. And I'm really excited to discuss this topic because, well, I guess it's an ethos I share in sort of principle, but the topic itself or the subject itself might need a little bit explaining for some of our listeners. So to tee you up a little bit, what inspired you to connect gardening principles, which let's face it, that's what they are, to cyber security strategies?
Yeah, so I suppose it's going backwards. So when I was at school, there was two paths. One was gardening and horticulture, and one was IT, and therefore now cybersecurity. Because when I started in IT, cybersecurity wasn't really a thing.
No.
But gardening and cybersecurity can seem like very different domains.
Yes.
But they share really a very important truth. They are about ongoing care, patience and proactivity towards a thriving environment.
Amazing.
So how I go about it is looking at a well-tended garden. They don't flourish by themselves and overnight. It does take some significant planning and caring over periods of time.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about this, it needs to be looking at resilience. And in cybersecurity, that strategy depends on foresight, as well as collaboration and commitment, which a garden does as well. I, of course, always inspired by these metaphors to make some really complicated cybersecurity concepts relatable to not only our cybersecurity professionals, but also the rest of the business. For example, when we're talking about planting seeds, these are a mirror of investing in foundational measures like team training, as well as system upgrades. Pruning, which is, again, one of the concepts that I talk about, is really just eliminating those inefficiencies and building resilience for foresighting systems to withstand those threats that we have out there. I also talk about pruning in regards to TPOs. So listeners might be aware of tree protection orders, which I relate back to policies and procedures and change control, because they're actually exactly the same. You have to apply to make sure a change is understood and it's following guidelines that the business, or as a TPO, your council, needs you to follow. So it's very similar. When we talk about nurturing, we talk about using cloches to protect the environments. This is exactly the same as in gardening. You're just making sure what is protected from any kind of attack. This could be slugs, for example, but it also could be somebody doing some background checking and then wanting to breach your environment.
That's so interesting, and even as we continue to speak, I continue to learn more about the gardening world. So that's really interesting. So it's right that the foundations of any relationship, they do obviously come down to laying roots. They come from laying down roots. How do you see relationship building as part of a kind of foundation of cybersecurity teams themselves?
Yeah, so from experience, I have been in the infrastructure side, as well as I actually was industry for cybersecurity too.
Yeah.
And bridging the gap, or of course, putting down roots, is how I would describe it in a gardening world, is the interconnections. Those interconnections need to be strong, because when items go wrong, or when you're needing to achieve a unified goal, you have to have those connections already there. You have to get the water, I suppose, from a tree's point of view. So
Yeah.
when relationships are strong, communication then becomes more transparent, and then the collaboration can happen more naturally.
Okay.
So, for example, you have a developer who trusts the cybersecurity team,
Yeah.
and they're more likely to engage, and therefore both teams have a better outcome. Cybersecurity teams are normally resounded as the black side. We don't want to be integrating with
Mm.
them. They're just going to stop any natural progression of our environment. We're going to put
Yeah.
in barriers. Normally, audit comes into the same kind of
Of
scope
course.
as well. But those environments cannot work in isolation. We have to
No.
expand and grow as teams. So strong relations can also foster a collaboration within security as a shared responsibility. We
Okay.
hear quite a lot that cybersecurity is everyone's problem, and it
Hmm.
is. But
Yeah.
if you are some teams that see that this is security as sort of oh, that's not my problem,
Yeah. Yeah.
or it's a external force imposing restrictions, and we develop that further, it's a collaborative event. It's a
Mm.
collaborative effort, because actually, when an incident happens, you need everyone, because
Yeah.
they will know their pockets of information, and sharing
Absolutely.
is ultimately caring.
It is. It is. Yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting. And you mentioned auditing, and I've kind of been on both sides of this. I've been the subject of kind of planned audits, and
Yep.
I've also been the one doing the auditing in the past as well. But
Yep.
why, like, one thing we see is that, or like, teams see audits as a threat. They see
Yep.
that as a threat. And I'm really interested to see which analogy you use here in the kind of garden to grid. But they see it as a threat. But how do we shift that perception? Because okay, great. Obviously, there needs to be more collaboration and
Yep.
break down that it's not someone else's problem. But how do we change that perception of the audit kind of aspect being a bit of a threat?
Yeah, so these teams, when we talk about them, we're talking about cybersecurity and audit teams, they're seen as roadblocks, like most people do. Their work highlights gaps, or they need to
Mm.
enforce something. It's like somebody nagging you. Nobody wants to hear the bad side all of the time. And
No.
they can look at temporarily slowing down processes to really secure the safety of an environment or product, when we're talking about sometimes development side. And it can feel quite restricted. You're suffocating. So when we're talking
Yeah.
about it as garden to grid, if we want to suffocate something, we are putting additional barriers in place that sometimes aren't necessarily needed. But we have to provide focus for that speed and delivery. So to shift this perspective, there's a couple of things that I like to use to be able to achieve this. So, for example, being proactive in our communication value. So, explaining the security values, understanding the measures, and to be able to align to the business. So, we all think in our little bubbles
Mm.
that we need to get stuff done, but
Yeah.
sometimes we forget about the bigger picture of what the
Sure.
business is requiring.
It happens, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But we also then need to be a collaborative for problem solving. Okay, so we are putting this restriction in place. This is causing this problem. So,
Mm.
for example, when we start putting in places for GPOs to be a little bit more restrictive, and somebody therefore can't access something, we need to come together to actually
Yeah.
problem solve and
Mm.
show that we are willing to help, not just hinder items.
Yeah.
And then we need to celebrate the wins. When we put something in place, when we are preventative, when people are patching good and on time and thoroughly, they need to be celebrated. So when I
Yeah.
used to go on calls with my infrastructure teams that were the ones patching, the first
Mm.
thing that I would normally come out with is actually, great, this is what you've done this month. This is fabulous. This has reduced our risk score by this. Now we need to cover this. These are the new ones that are coming in, but we always celebrate first, because it's a bit like a sandwich. You need to do
Y-
good, the bad, and then the good again,
Yeah.
just to, it's human nature. We have to
Yeah.
celebrate as much as possible.
Yeah, because otherwise, and not to deviate onto a different analogy, but it can end up being a bit of a hygiene factor, isn't it? Like nothing happens if you don't, if you, yeah, sorry, nothing happens if you do it, but something happens if you don't do it. Whereas actually, that's something to be avoided, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and having some empathy, bringing
Mm,
emotions into this. We are very clinical when we come to it's good or it's bad, but if we have some empathy and flexibility to aligning the business goals or security goals, then there's a transition. We do not seem as hard and
mm,
fast on these
yeah,
rules. We're a bit more understanding, but we can put other things in place. If something is missing some criteria, is there anything else that we can do, or is it hard and fast? No, but this is the reason why. And explaining and bringing in some real emotions from a human
yeah,
to human basis can significantly help. When we started talking, I started talking at B-sides, and this topic here about putting down roots and about interconnecting those roots with other teams.
yeah,
It is felt that sometimes we are really good at dishing out, and sometimes, there's barriers put in place, and how do we improve this? And I know that we'll talk about, how we can plant those seeds.
yeah.
But I think it's really important to know, how that can be shifted.
Yeah. Okay. Amazing. So a lot of our listeners will be kind of leaders in cybersecurity or maybe broader IT. So
Yep.
what kind of you teed me up perfectly, so thank you for that. What kind of practical ways can they plant the seeds in inverted commas, for that
Yeah.
better communication between cybersecurity? Yeah, we talk about silos and things like that. How does what practical ways can we address those?
I think it starts with education. We
Mm,
all talk about how we need to improve our own teams, but it needs to be throughout the business, bringing
yeah,
them into workshops and training sessions, because everybody ultimately wants to go be better than they are.
of
But also
course, yeah.
it's less scary if you open the doors and go, okay,
Mm,
we're going to do this blue team exercise. We're going to
yeah.
do purple teaming, which again is an amazing event, to
Mm,
bringing these people together and going, okay, this is the vision that I have. You need to, we're into the different spots. We need to kind of build out on this.
yeah,
Um, it's a mutual understanding, and there is respect there, bringing everybody together. I feel that embedding that security as early as possible is fabulous.
yeah.
Encouraging that collaboration and planning. So I know it's not always possible with smaller companies, but having
Mm,
security consultants or to go out and know what the projects are and being involved with projects early
yeah,
on
yeah,
means that it's not barriers because somebody's done that piece of work and now we're having to assess it.
yeah.
Okay, well, bring us on board early and
Early, yeah.
then we can implement as we go along. So it's not sort of a hard, fast butting of heads.
Yes,
And
yeah.
cross team connections are really important. And that can be
Mm,
quite difficult if we're still in remote working.
yes.
I remember pre-COVID,
Hmm.
I would go over to people's desks that were doing the patching. I would sit
Yeah.
down and talk them through because some vulnerabilities, it's not just a patch. Sometimes it's a registry key change, or
Yeah.
it's a configuration change on a GPO. And sitting down and
Yes.
then walking them through it is a way of, facilitating that cross-team sort of
Yeah.
connections.
Yeah, that makes sense actually. Yeah, because we do see that often. It is a kind of external, like you said, a butting of heads.
Yeah.
And so that kind of early communication, early engagement, education, cross team,
Yeah.
all of those really good things.
And then the final thing, I suppose, the last bit in
Mm.
regards to how leaders can lead a
Yeah.
better communication is we need to align our metrics. Our metrics are
Hmm.
hard and fast. There will be KPIs aligned to security based upon normally complicated environments, but also you have to meet some certifications.
Yes.
But actually, if you have joint accountability for those KPIs, it means that we're working as a team. We are making
Yes.
sure that we are strengthening the overall resilience by going a shared issue, but this is a shared KPI. We all need to adhere to it,
Yeah.
and let's work together to get there.
Oh, that's really good actually, because otherwise it's somebody else's
Problem.
problem, isn't it? Yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like, well, I'm
absolutely.
helping you out here, so yeah. But if it's a shared thing, it can really change the dynamic. So,
Absolutely.
as a follow-on to this, then, in your own specific experience, Becky,
Yeah.
what challenges do security teams face when trying to establish that trial? Bearing in mind we
I
have a
know I rolled
short,
my eyes there.
yeah.
So we are seen as gatekeepers. We are the nose.
Mm.
We can cause
Yes, yeah.
tension between the teams because they have different priorities. They have different innovation ideas that they want. And we can be classed as gatekeepers because we're just going to go, no, we
No,
can't
can't do
do
that.
that
Yeah.
now or yet. And I
Mm.
think that's the problem, one crux of the problem.
Yeah.
We have misaligned objectives. We are wanting
Yes.
to create a secure environment. Developers or infrastructure teams, we're seen as the slowers. We all know we're sort of, oh, are you sure about that? And
Yeah.
so therefore it can enable, measures need to be taken differently. We have a visibility of impact. The reality is that we can see the security efforts, but they're often invisible to everyone else. But that's when they work well. They're invisible when they
Yes.
work well. When they
Yeah.
don't, this is where we are seen again as those gatekeepers, because like I said about, access requirements, role-based access requirements is still in its infancy in some
It
places.
is. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
start implementing that,
Mm.
people can get really hit up,
Yeah.
especially when you start rolling it up to higher levels of management. Well, I am this person. Why do I have to have restrictions?
And I just need it to work.
Yes, just
Yeah.
make it work. I don't care what you have to do. And that's, again, quite a common feature. And that's also within infrastructure. I felt that pain myself.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I think is that communication, the technical jargon that we use. We have lots of acronyms of stuff, and we can alienate not only the non-technical teams, but
Yeah.
sometimes actually the technical teams, we have different language,
Yeah. Of
zero
course.
trust, all of this.
Yeah.
And okay, well, what does that actually mean?
Mm.
And then we have to try and overcome them. And so we have to adopt a more collaborative mindset, demonstrating
Yes.
that we're on the same team and need to align with the organization's goals, but also communicate those benefits to the business, to make sure that we are relatable. We are
Yeah.
just humans at the same time. We
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
a job to do. They have a job to do. Let's see if we can kind of meet it in the middle.
Sounds really easy.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But then I wouldn't
Yeah.
be talking about this if it
We
was that
wouldn't. We
easy.
wouldn't. So on that note, then, like, so you've got first-hand experience of implementing this.
Yeah.
What examples have you got where a really good relationship has actually directly improved cybersecurity? So we have talked about it being a bit of a butting of heads and
Yeah.
a bit of a no team. Like, where have you seen it improving the cybersecurity outcome?
It's incident response. That
Yeah.
is the
Okay.
biggest key aspect. When you are in a incident, like I said, when we're doing purple teaming, that is a test. That's a little
Yes.
playtime to see,
Of course.
can we work together? Because actually, incident response, you need to be together. And if you've not
Yeah.
built those relationships, well, it becomes even more problematic. And
Yeah.
security people can be even more secretive in an incident. And that's well
Yes.
known. We're in a war room. Go away, everyone else. We're here.
We're going to
I'm
try
going
and
to
fix
tell you
it.
what to do,
What to
and you're
do?
going to ask no questions.
Yeah.
And sometimes that you have to be like that when we're talking about data retention, when we're talking about customers being impacted. That has to happen, because more people that know, the more risk is associated with that. But when we use close collaboration, I will put my teeth in again. When we're talking about cybersecurity infrastructure, it's led to a faster detection. For one, they know their infrastructure.
And they do.
100%.
Yeah.
They can see things that we should see based upon, playbooks and those kind of things, but we don't know everything because we can't know everything.
Yeah.
There are teams that specialize in these little core pockets.
Yes,
you get them on side, they're able to give you the access into your scene product to be able to show and then run SOC to then do your playbooks.
Yeah, yeah.
But they're also able to contain a ransom attack so much quicker than you can.
Yeah,
and
well,
therefore,
way quicker than any playbook or anything, any documentation.
Absolutely, because they know the buttons. They know every single aspect of it. We of course try to see over, the plan of attack, all of your attack vectors, but that's not always the case. We can't always do that. So then we also now need to do that to reduce that attack downtime. Instead of days, it's then hours. Because you're all on the same page. Okay, we've run this again. We've run this before. Let's spring into action because we know it. And I talk about different aspects. And they're, I'm talking about relationships here, but they all play into the same root system that relationships, building out a incident response plan, they all are the same, tree ultimately.
Same tree. Yeah. Love it.
So when we then also talk about that, I suppose it's the secure development platforms, making sure they are partnered with the cybersecurity teams. And this is what I spoke about before, is that being at the beginning of a major project, it sees a reduction in vulnerabilities, significant reduction in vulnerabilities, because again, security teams have practices in place of what good development framework works like. You can have systems that will check the code. Code checking is very important. When we start developing web applications in the cloud, again, you're talking about infrastructure as code. They ultimately have an objective. I need to build this. I need to get it running as quickly as possible because there's dollar signs to my application, where we kind of can come in and we don't need to rip down and replace if we're already at the start. It's about a 40% reduction in the vulnerabilities or misconfigurations if you start something post, in comparison to pre. And then departmental awareness. Like we said, everybody has to have a piece of the pie when it comes to security.
Yes.
And, everybody has that fish every now and again. And if we break down that communication, we all going to have an organization where HR and security collaborate as well, because we need to do those phishing. We need to be testing people, because I have been again at the end of a fish that came back, and they nearly lost a lot of money because they had a fish and it was a real fish. So it's really important to kind of understand how HR want to be doing training. There needs to be separate training for cybersecurity, but we need to liaise at the same time, so we don't have any unwanted phishing attempts, shall we say.
No, and that's a really key point. That's something we see quite often, is that it becomes an IT thing, that someone's running a phishing simulation, but actually it's much so wider. So it's almost it transcends anything IT.
Yeah, and it's quite funny actually, because security were running a fish, didn't tell infrastructure. Infrastructure saw it come in, and they removed it from everyone's mailbox. And this was a fish simulation. So it proved that infrastructure, they were all over it. They were ready. And this was, they didn't know because it had to be a secret. It does.
It does.
But it was flagged that, well, actually, don't infrastructure need to be part of this communication for phishing? Because we can just whip it from their mailboxes. And so nobody sees it. Nobody is tested. So again, a project was put in place to make sure that they were aware, because the exchange engineers, that is easy. Oh, right, we can find this. Anybody that has this in their mailbox, we'll pull it out and put it into trash. Remove it from mailboxes.
Yeah, it was a good thing, but actually it hindered the actual purpose of the exercise in that case, didn't it?
It did. Yeah. But again, that's if communication was happened at an earlier stage, that relationship was built, then they would know, or that they felt trusted to go,
Yes.
okay, we don't need to be hyper vigilant all the time.
Right.
But it also proves that they are security focused too.
It does. Yeah, yeah. Maybe a bit more credit was due there.
Oh, that I celebrated their win there, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But it highlighted back to the security teams that, oh, actually, we did miss a trick here.
We did, yeah, of course, yeah,
Mm.
and it is probably a bit siloed. So how do we? I think we're talking about measurement here, really.
Yeah.
How can organisations kind of measure the impact? So we talked about how do they, yeah, what the successes look like. But
Yep.
let's say that we're going through it, we're putting much greater communication and relationships and early adoption, bringing
Yep.
people in sooner, great communication. How do they measure the impact of it? Say if they've done that for 6 months or a year, and they go, well, how do we know it's working? How do we know it's improving?
Well, some of these are hidden, I
Mm,
suppose.
yeah,
So one of them is, we can look at quantitative measurements, things like response times to incidents. Again, if you put stuff in place, you shouldn't have this. So
yeah,
one hidden one. Vulnerability closure rates. Okay, well, how well are the teams remediating items? And
mm,
then again, frequency of successful phishing attempts. Okay, how
right,
many of those coming through? Or you could, of course, look at it as a training exercise. How many people are noticing what phishing attempts are? And that's, of
yeah,
course, going back to making sure you have that cross-departmental awareness from HR and the rest of your company, that
mm,
what is a phish? What do I need to look for?
yes,
You've got qualitative measurements and feedback. So conducting surveys based upon the team's confidence on security processes and
yeah,
communication. We need feedback. Everybody needs feedback, whether it's the good, the bad, or the ugly. And we
yes,
have to learn from that feedback. So if you are sending out feedback forms that's like, okay, how are you guys getting on with the security teams? And it's like, oh, they're a black hole, we don't want to
mm,
talk to them, then
mm,
something needs to be done.
yeah,
And I at one point was brought on board to a company because they knew I was a happy, clappy, chatty security person, to
yeah,
break down the barriers of, we're not a scary place. Come and talk to us. We're
yeah,
here to help.
yes, yeah,
Um, and participation ratings. So how
okay,
well are we participating? So it's a cross team, initiative. So things like when you do those purple teams, these
mm,
are events that you could run. How many people want to do that? Capture the
yeah,
flag events. How many people outside of your small team want to get involved? And that
yeah,
also kind of indicates how well are the team that you've got, how approachable they are, and then ultimately showing based upon the participation of others,
yes.
as well as internally. Having a team event internally can also prove very, very interesting too. And finally, the reduction of incidents. Of course,
Of
that has
course,
to be the
it's the
final
biggest
one.
the biggest KPI. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. The fewer breaches, but also the faster recovery
mm,
indicates that you've got a strong collaboration and communication. Communication is key. It's the two C's, collaboration and communication. They are very
yeah,
strong and they need to be interlinked. So you can help, and this gives you tangible insights into how an improved relationships can make it easier, but
yeah,
also it can help you justify the continuous investment in that collaboration, because time and effort equals money
mm,
from your own teams, but also, okay, well, we're going to need to spend other times here, there, and elsewhere.
yeah.
You need to make sure that reduction and that recuperation of investment is being done. So that's my key four metrics.
Yeah, and I did probably to some degree incorrectly, but also correctly say that the reduction in incidents is a big KPI. But
It is.
some organisations might never get there to measure that. Hopefully there isn't a massive incident that everyone's got to jump through. Fingers crossed, like you said.
Yeah,
When I was listening and
exactly.
can't see Becky, fingers crossed then. But it is also all the other things are great because then you've got those elements to go. Actually, let's do it now and let's do it again in a year's time or six
Yeah,
months time to go. How are we getting better? And almost I can sort of visualize a bit of a matrix of
yeah.
measurements and yeah,
But also team, a matrix, like you said, is a fundamental part, making sure your team is trained on all aspects. You do not want to be going into an incident. So when we're saying reduced incidents, this also highlights collaboration within your security, because you might not have just one person. I worked for a company that had 1, 2, 3, 5 little buckets of teams within security.
Okay.
Yes, I worked for a larger organization. So we had little buckets, but bringing them together, doing a skills matrix of who knows what. And most people don't start in security when you get to sort of, in the 30s and 40s, generally. You've not just started out in cybersecurity.
No.
Infrastructure is a very good backbone for security.
It is, yeah.
So if anybody is wanting to come into the industry, starting up as an IT technician like I did, it gives you in good stead, that's for sure.
It does. It absolutely does. No getting away from that. So separately then, we've got kind of technical aspects of the organisation, and then we've got the board priorities, which is kind of something we haven't sort of so some of that big stuff together. So in your experience, how do leaders bridge that gap between the two? Because that is always going to be probably the biggest chasm, I guess, between what the technical team want to drive and the priorities and where the board's heading.
So what I've seen in the market a lot now is talking about risk. So we don't talk about how exploitable vulnerability is. We don't talk about sorry, excuse me. We don't talk about how much risk is associated with certain stuff coming in regards to zero trust. We don't talk about that anymore, because we talk about risk, because then we talk about it
higher, doesn't it?
Well, we talk about it as business, and that's what we have to translate. The ability to talk about how much cybersecurity risk and collaborate that with what impact does that have on a business and real life risk in regards to those. So using language that resonates with a higher panel of the board, such as financial, reputation, rather than just the technical. We have to bring in the business language. It's not as simple as, I've got this many vulnerabilities that are high, they're critical, it's going to cause this problem because these hackers are using these items to do these attack vendors. They don't know, and some of them don't care, because they're worried about the financial numbers. And that is absolutely key, that we need to now start developing teams that can articulate risk, and financial risk is a big one. And I know cybersecurity industry is going more and more down the insurance route, which is fabulous. But you need to know how much risk you've got first before being able to put a number on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing you said there about the risk, it kind of helps you kind of keep those priorities proportionate to the risk as well, because there might be a risk which is all over cybersecurity news, it might be all over social media, but actually for you as an organization, it might mean, it could be catastrophic, but the probability of that happening could be minuscule. And so it can help you kind of prioritize those keep those priorities proportionate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always think, so how I describe it, I was in vulnerability management for a very long time. When we're talking about those, they are generally vulnerabilities out there. This is the vulnerability that you need to look out for. And so any decent vulnerability management solution will give you the ability to search for a specific vulnerability. And you need to be doing that in addition to your regular vulnerability management. So, and I talk about this deeper in a different session that I'm running. Vulnerability management, of course, that is one of my core strengths, shall we say.
Great.
And as long as you can go, I need to know that now that needs to be what I would call out of band scanning. So, and again, there needs to be an internal process for that you do not need to go to change control. You need to go, right, we've got an issue, I need to be able to scan it now. And you go, yes, change control, I've done that TPO, great, I can do it now. So it's that And that's the understanding that your system's not going to break because you're going to scan it with a vulnerability scanner. So again, that's building that collaboration, the little comfort blanket that security are not going to cause a network outage, and how that's done. So it's again needing the collaboration to go, we need to scan this. Board are saying, or our customers are saying, are you at risk of this? Because we need to show that the ROI for our investments.
Absolutely.
So it's being able to be proactive and using the money that they've given you sensibly. You can't go and buy the greatest thing of every single tiny aspect of security, because you'd be wasting a lot of money at times.
That's right.
So sometimes bringing solutions together is a very good fit. Because you're going to protect the revenue, but also, ensuring that compliance aspect. There's another couple of things that I would highlight on is everyone likes a visual. Give somebody a visual of or a chart to illustrate how well you're doing. Instead of numbers. Numbers are great for a financial person. Yep.
Sure.
Do they know what they're talking about? As in, the numbers, do they speak for themselves, or does an actual visual representation of this is where we were, this is where we are now? So you can visually see the change. So I was, higher or lower in that regard. And then sharing those real world examples. So you need to give them stories that are, of course, of what you are doing and how you are utilizing things and security to benefit the business. So, for example, where you averted or mitigated a potential incident, making technical risks feel more tangible and to those decision makers. They don't know what decisions that you are making day in, day out, because you are trying to lead a security team or, of course, security within a smaller environment. Because aligning your initiatives to what the business priorities are have to be key, because they are going to give you your money for the next year of incentives or development work within your security team. So it needs to be a cohesive strategy between the two of you, whether that's a whole entire board or whether it's just a few people and you're dealing with your chief revenue officer.
The principle's still the same, isn't it?
Exactly. Everybody needs to know, and whether that's creating a dashboard for them, so you can see money in, money out, where is it going, as well as what the true value of their investment has meant. This is meaning that we can get now this certification, which means that we are more trusted as a supplier to your customers, therefore generating more income. So it's not a pool of dead money, because certifications and therefore audits, as well as security measures, you can then potentially generate more income.
And you can demonstrate the ROI you talked about before, right?
Absolutely.
So,
much easier.
Much easier, for sure. It's been really, really interesting. Honestly, it's been such a fascinating. When we first had the first conversation about this, I was like, I could not wait for us to have this conversation, and I really, really feel the same now still. So it's been really interesting. So I think maybe as a roundup to all the great things we've talked about and all the really, really useful tips and suggestions you've given. What advice would you give, so as an all-round, give to organisations just starting to try and, starting on their initial journey to try to kind of prioritise the relationships as part of their, their newly found garden to grid cybersecurity strategy?
So those roots start small is the foundation of this. So you're going to need to begin with one route out to a team to start developing that and bringing people on board. So adventure out, put those routes to good use and just test the water. Where is the water finishing? If I find more water elsewhere, put those root systems to good use. Your tree has to start somewhere. I suggest education is a massive thing. People want to learn. Cybersecurity is still quite a shiny thing that people want to go towards. It is,
actually. Yeah.
It is. And if you can share that knowledge that helps them better themselves, or, they might be a shiny little rock in the stream that you can pick up and go, actually, no, you're really good. And you can also find great enthusiasm internally within your other teams that can improve your security team as a whole. And then people know people. So if you start with education and going, I'm a person that you can come and lean on to understand what we do, and you can understand, and I can learn from you, and vice versa.
Yeah. These things are always
That's
two-way, aren't they?
brilliant.
Yeah.
We need to celebrate the wins. So not just your own team, but celebrate the teams of other people to higher up. It will dramatically improve what other people perceive of you. So if you go, well, I didn't do this vulnerability remediation work, this team did, and they did it in this amount of time. Last time they did it in this amount of time. So they are improving, and they are improving our, the score and reputation of our business because they're doing a fabulous job.
That's
And
so
like I said,
important.
the celebrating of those wins, when you have an incident, okay, it gets messy, but then it
Of
comes
course.
together.
Yeah.
Celebrate those wins. And you can celebrate that in a multitude of ways, not only on a nice little pretty report that you send back to your higher levels, but also celebrate it with, pizza. It's a really well-known thing that most techies like is a bit of pizza. Um, and be patient, trust, it takes so much time, but it's so easy to rip down. So don't
Yeah.
throw people under
Yeah.
the bus when you get an
No.
incident. It happens a lot.
That's a
Um,
shame. Yeah.
it can do when you're all in that stressful position. You can point
Yeah,
fingers,
sure.
but be
Yeah.
patient with yourself, with your team, because trust takes time. The long-term benefits of it significantly outweigh the initial effort that it's going to take. But
Yeah.
these are laying foundations. This is not a one click of your fingers, it's all
No.
going to be fixed. You're going to have those pockets of people that you can rely on to help or to give you information or be part of a project. It's not so easy, but it takes
No.
time, and that return on investment for your time and dedication to building
Yeah.
those relationships will significantly outweigh any amount of time, because it will be quicker next time.
It will be quicker
You're a
next time.
trusted advisor, and that's what you
Yeah.
need to be, a trusted advisor, because a resilient strategy, it's just it grows over and over again.
It does. That's brilliant. Honestly, Becky, it's been so interesting to have this conversation with you. I've really enjoyed every aspect of it. I don't think I'm ever going to be able to look at any cybersecurity strategy without thinking of the garden to grid analogy ever again.
It's one of those things that, for me, it's just, okay, I'm just talking about gardening, and then I go out with my kids and I plant some seeds, and I go to I went away on holiday to one of these places with in a forest, and you look up and you
Yeah.
go, okay, well, there's my gaps, there's my vulnerability gaps that I can see right there.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
you just see it from a natural perspective, even though I've worked with tech all of my career.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I can still feel something, even though it's just dashes and dots, ones and
Yeah.
zeros.
Absolutely. I mean, I love an analogy, but yeah, I think you've played the trump card in this one. So
Yeah,
thank you so much, Becca. It's been great, Becca. Thanks for being on this. It's been really interesting, and thanks very much.
no, amazing. Thank you so much.